Our good friends at KBC Bank are going to do the draw live up here. They want the photographs for the promotion, so if you're not in the room, tough. Going to keep drawing until someone stands up with the ticket and we can give them the prize. How's that sound? I can't hear you, sorry. What? Woo! That's better.
Go team.
Follow that.
That's tough to follow, yeah. Hi, how are you? My name is Keith McDonough from KBC Bank in Ayr Square. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming in to hopefully someone win the iPad. I'd like to thank Dave for giving us the opportunity to be here today and to be involved in this. I think it's fantastic what's happening out there and what's happening in the room here, and congratulations, David, for organising a fantastic event. Okay. What I'm going to say is everyone can be a winner with KBC. At the minute, we're offering student accounts with €100 in it. So anyone who'd like one of those can come into Ayr Square to us and we'll sort that out. But we can only have one winner of the iPad here today. So our winner, and we'll have to keep drawing until we find someone, but our winner, we're going to try first with Kieran O'Halloran. I'm not going to get lucky on the first time out, am I? No. Not for me, it wasn't. Okay, we'll try again at Niall O'Tuchel. Third date it is. Sebastian Ruan. Aaron O'Donnell. Pádraig Curran. Fourth date, that's not too bad. Congratulations. Thank you. Well done.
Push down, let's push down a bit. Make sure you get the sign, yeah, good stuff. Everybody kneel down, that's enough now. Next up, we're going to have the gaming panel. Is that my one? No?
You don't get one on this. You got to shake hands.
Thanks. Next up, we got our gaming panel led by Sam Redfern, our own Sam Redfern, lecturer here. Many of you know him. Yeah, come on, give it up. We'll just be 2 more minutes, just collecting the last two presenters, and we'll start up, okay?
Does that work as well? Yes. Okay, we have 3 of our 4 panel members. Hopefully the one might turn up. Some of you might know me, some might not. I'm a lecturer here in NUIG, but games is my thing and always has been. So I've been making games since the 1980s, would you believe? As have some of the other, well, the panel member missing in particular has. So I will introduce Mark Hillick, first guy here, who is an engineer in Riot, particularly in the information security team. So he's been into network and infrastructure security for 14 years. And he just got his first pentakill, and he's very excited about that. So he's worse than my son at League of Legends. And then we've got Alan Duggan, who people from around Galway might know. He has a game company called Tribal City Interactive, and he's been in mobile games since before they were smart, in fact, making mobile games since about 2002. And he says he's a techie at heart, but I guess he finds himself working on the business and production side of things. Such is life. And then at the end we have Jen Carey, who is working for Havok. She's a QA engineer in Havok. Graduated from IT Carlow in a computer game development degree, so she's the only one of us who's done that. And has worked for Playfirst as well, and now in Havok as a QA engineer. So what I'm going to do is I'll pose a few questions that might be specific to them, and then we'll try and get some more general ones and see what happens. I'll aim to do questions at the end, but if any of you would want to throw up your hands in the meantime, hopefully we can make it a bit interactive. So my first one's for Mark Hillick. Working for Riot Games. So my son was very excited to hear about this. So I said to my son, can you give me a probing and insightful question about League of Legends, maybe the future of esports? So his question is, why is Teemo so bad?
So Cohen, who's at the back, and we drove down from Dublin today, and we were actually discussing this question because we got a heads up that it might come up. So I've been thinking about this since yesterday, and I still don't really have the answer, which is how many people play League of Legends? How many people play Teemo? How many people, when you get through like Champ Select, and then it goes into game and you see someone has selected Teemo, like how many people like kind of say a few words that you probably can't say here? right? So most people who pick Teemo can be described as trolls. Teemo is a really easy champion to play, but he's like a real pain. And he has a couple of, I guess, abilities. One of which is his passive, where you can't actually see him. So he just goes into stealth mode.
Okay.
And there's a couple things when you're playing a MOBA game, certain champions, if they have, so I really hate Nidalee, and I hate Shaco. I hate Nidalee because I can never get near her. I hate Shaco because I never really know what's going to happen. These little boxes keep coming up. And I really hate Teemo because these mushrooms, like his ult, you can't see the thing, so you're walking into it, and then boom, you just have a ton of damage and you've lost half your health. And his passive is he just disappears, and you also can't get near him. So I think maybe someone might disagree, but you take those things together, and he doesn't take that much skill. So it's like when you play a game, it's really cool being beat by someone who's like better than you, because you learn, right? So you're raising your bar all the time. But when you're beat by someone who's Teemo, you never really walk away going, wow, that person was a really good player. You're like, that person was a real such and such. Does that set the context for?
I'll feed it back to my son.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Alan has been making mobile games for longer than most of us. I remember discussing it with him years ago, actually. We're hoping maybe you might have some thought or insight into where do you think technology and market forces are leading us, and what might the life of a smartphone games developer look like in the future?
Oh God, so I get the boring question. Well, maybe not so much. Well, obviously things have changed quite a bit, technology-wise, obviously, but I think probably the biggest shift has been more in the players. And I think the reason you see a lot more games being played on mobile is because it's much more mass audience. How we continue to feed that is a good question. And the second part of your question, which is how do you survive or how do you manage as an indie in that kind of a situation, it's really hard right now to survive as an indie. Primarily because it's very hard to get your games noticed. So it's really, really easy to get your stuff out there, but really, really hard to get people's attention. That's only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Unless somebody, maybe somebody in the room, is smart enough and manages to break the model. It's been done before. Before Apple disrupted everything, you had the operators who had a chokehold on distribution. Apple came in and just wiped it all away. So you never know. Something like that hopefully might be around the corner.
Thank you. Jen, who works in QA in Havoc. I don't know much about what it is to be a QA engineer. I'm basically a hacker. So maybe you could tell us what you like about this work. What drove you to it?
One of the main interesting things about QA, there's two different kinds. One is structured and one is explorative. And structured, you get things like test cases, very specific things you have to run through. But once you get to the explorative, you just decide you want to do something with the program, or you want to do something in the game, and you just try and make it happen. So it's really great to learn all different products, and just you get to use new technology like constantly. So it's fun in that respect. Of course, there's also when you are making QA for a new product, you have to read a lot of documentation and write up cases yourself, which isn't so much fun, but everything has its downsides.
Okay, so there's a few things we've been kicking around in terms of. One thing I noticed, of course, is it's a very varied panel. Unfortunately, Rob Stocker isn't here because he made it even more varied. Four of us have all taken very different routes into the games industry. So we've got kind of formal game development degrees, which is what Jen has done, which I guess didn't exist for the rest of us. We have Mark, who's coming through more of a technical route, but not games. And maybe Alan and me, who've just kind of forced our way in on the ground floor and doing it ourselves. Alan is an entrepreneur, me just as an indie developer. So there's lots of routes. I don't know what the panel, has any interesting insights or thoughts on this?
On how we got here, or
on how anyone could get in there now, I guess, or
right. So hopefully a lot of people are aware that the Romeros are in Ireland at the moment, and as part of the Fulbright Commission, they're looking at how the industry is structured here and how the universities are supporting it and all that kind of stuff. And there's been a lot of interesting conversation around what we have and what we don't have in the country to support games development. A really interesting one that came up at their talk recently in Galway was community. That we have an incredibly active and vibrant community here, much more so than even in the States. Like they were comparing us to places like Austin, where they would kill for the kind of support systems that are here amongst fellow developers. So that's definitely a positive that we have, and I would see it when you're starting out doing something yourself. It's one of the critical things that you're not in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So I've taken, I guess, quite a different route than most. To give a bit of context, I worked through financial systems, then I worked on a tech company called Citrix, and then into a real tech startup called MongoDB, which is like databases, and then I joined Riot. But in between that, I've got like a master's in mathematics, so I'm probably what you would call a true nerd, which actually seems to be cool now, as opposed to 20 years ago, so that's nice. But what I also did is I've done a lot of security work in the community, and I've released stuff open source, and I actually built like my own hacking game, which is like Capture the Flag, and I ran that for 3 years. So, and then I also did certifications. So though I've got like 14, 15 years experience, and it didn't really happen until I was like 28, 29 that I actually figured out what I really wanted to do, like what I wanted to do as a job or as a career. And that was really within security engineering. And because I'm older than most, I played games on like Amstrad, CPC 464. Like if I had seen Minecraft when I was playing Shinobi on the Amstrad, I would have thought Minecraft was like incredibly graphic, which it's obviously not, right? So that's how old I am. I never actually thought of working in games because I didn't think that was possible. Whereas the opportunities that people have now, I would have killed to have that when I was growing up. But the one thing I always did was I always went after my heart. I never went after my head. So ironically, I actually did a mathematics degree because I loved math, which is quite sad, but that's what I love doing. So my advice would always be to do what you love, because eventually I believe that it will come true. And once you actually do that and you get the job that you truly love, you're never actually working a day of your life. Like, don't get me wrong, my job is stressful. I'm actually responsible for information security for Riot globally. So that's quite, sorry, let me rephrase that. I'm accountable for like a lot of information security issues for Riot globally. My boss is the VP of security and ops. So I'm like an Irish kid who grew up in like the 80s or 90s, and I never thought I would have such a cool job where I could go into work and deal with really technical problems that I love and challenges that come up every day that I could never predict. And I also get to play the odd game. Now, granted, I suck and I probably feed a lot more than I should, but hey, it's like, not only is it a first world problem, but it's a really good first world problem. And it's all because I kind of went after stuff that I loved, as opposed to when I was in a financial institution, I was still doing tech stuff. I was working on firewalls, writing scripts. I was like lying on the data center floor, you know, ripping shirts, ripping ties, like looking for RJ45 cables, but it was still what I love. And I never went the way that other people in that financial institution went. They started in IT, and then they went the management route, and now they're still in there, but I get to do really cool shit every day. So I just went with my heart, and that would be my one piece of advice. If that answers the question.
That sounds excellent.
You beat that.
Well, from the formal games degree side, I guess it's not that different from just doing a normal programming degree. The stuff we studied, there are modules in game development, there's a bit on game design, but largely it was C++, C#, Python, JavaScript, Lua, that kind of stuff. It was programming intensive, and you just started a portfolio earlier, really. So there's nothing standing in the way between somebody who has a formal degree and somebody who knows how to code. If you can show that you can do stuff, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff changing in the games world. It really has shook up this decade, the last 10 years or so. The day of the indie seems to have come, and is it gone again? This is kind of my question. Is it possible to be an indie and be successful anymore, or is it all kind of ex-AAA people masquerading as indies and kind of, charging through Kickstarter and getting lots of money that way? Or, what does it mean to be an indie now? Is it still possible? Will it be possible?
I think I'm probably the wrong person to ask for that. I think that would be, I don't know, but I think Apple has really, as you said, destroyed the market in so many ways, and they're the key distribution. So, yeah, I would probably agree. It's definitely incredibly hard.
Yeah. I'd say it's incredibly hard, but it's not over. Yes, the standards are higher than they've ever been for indies, but there's also, so at the moment there's kind of this mad rush to go free to play and to create something that just gathers lots and lots of people, and then you're hoping that you've got enough of a churn in there that people will go and actually spend money on your in-app purchases and whatever. But that only works for a very small subset of games. We've pitched a lot of games over the last year and a half to publishers, and more often than not, they are looking for those games that have high retention and that have got all the mechanics that are dragging you towards that in-app purchase. And in some respects, that's a little bit soul-destroying. So you can go that route and you can try to do that, but even the simplest of those games is a big undertaking. Or you can say, what, to hell with that. I'm going to do something that's small and niche that will make a return but will not make me a multimillionaire. And I think that's kind of the choice. If you're going to be an indie, I think the choice you have to kind of think about is, do I want to make the stuff that I like making for an audience that's like me, or do I want to make stuff that's uber successful? Of course, everybody wants a success. I'm not suggesting that anybody would want different, but it's a case of how you get there. There are companies who have a different attitude completely, which is just watch what's happening on the store and copy it fast and get it out there.
Yeah.
And people are making a lot of money off that. But I would kind of consider that selling your soul a little bit. So.
Yeah, I suppose I guess freemium is kind of a way of solving the visibility problem, in that you can at least get visibility that way. Because if you're not free, will you even be seen? But it seems to be, I think you were hinting at it there, it's kind of about building a fan base and over an extended period of time releasing consistent stuff that your previous customers or fans or whatever will like.
Yeah, if you think of the Kickstarters that were successful, the people who did them they brought fans to Kickstarter. We looked at doing a Kickstarter, it's over a year ago, and we had a chat with one of the guys. He was actually the ex-CTO, and his advice to us was, don't go to Kickstarter expecting to find people there. You have to bring a fan base to Kickstarter to monetize them. That's pretty much how it works. So, when you were saying, is Kickstarter gone for games? Yeah, I think we'll see. It very much depends on how things pan out in the next while. There's a lot of games that are to be delivered, and if they don't deliver on the promises, then there'll be a lot of kickback on it.
It almost seems to be like a lot of developers just seem to think it's the route you take. You throw yourself on green light, you throw yourself on Kickstarter, and something has to give there.
What about Super Meat Boy? Sorry, so what about Super Meat Boy? You know, the indie game documentary? Yeah. They kind of took a different route, didn't they? Have you seen that documentary?
The documentary, no.
Okay, so they released on Xbox, I think, and it was like a platform game.
Yeah.
I think Jen might know a little bit more. We were talking about it now? Okay.
Just very general that it was made and lots of people liked it.
Yeah, there's like literally, so the indie game documentary, you can get it. You can get it on Netflix for free, or if you like the Apple distribution model, you can buy it on iTunes. But it's all about a couple of guys creating different games, and one of them was Super Meat Boy, and it was literally these two guys, and they just went after a game that they loved and the type of game that they loved, and it's incredibly addictive. Like the gameplay is phenomenal, and I think that's kind of an exception to the model that you guys were discussing.
Actually, what I would suggest for people who want to be indie, that's kind of what you have to do.
Oh, but sorry, I mean like in terms of the Apple model, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
But it was really cool to see two guys who were just complete nerds, and when they released it, Microsoft actually messed up a little bit on the release, so it didn't go onto the front page of Xbox, and then they rectified that, and then literally like the days following, it was literally like watching these guys earning, tens of thousands, which is awesome because they put their heart and soul into it. And throughout the video, you could actually see, IDE environments and like code sitting there, and it was all like correctly indented, and it was like color, and you're like going, I'm like trying to see like what they're actually doing. It was pretty cool.
There might actually be a trend as well that you notice across answers. Learn to code. I think this is a big thing. If you want to make games, learn to code.
Yeah. Okay. What would you guys have to say about the Irish game industry? It's clearly woefully small, I would say. As Alan said, we've been making efforts. People have been making efforts to build community. I was actually surprised with his answer on that because I felt that we were hard done by a few years ago, because I've been to kind of conferences about games in various places, and they all seem to have these great communities, self-supportive, kind of mutually encouraging each other. Where's the Irish industry going? Why is it so small? Is there anything we can do about it? Is there anything somebody else can do about it?
Well, I don't really know about Galway, but I know in Dublin there's a huge indie scene. Mm-hmm. There's Dubludo meetups once a month, loads of companies that all get there, everyone shares ideas, shares tactics, just goes through absolutely everything, and everyone helping each other. There's an Irish game dev group on Facebook with about 700 members of people who are constantly active. So considering how young the industry is, especially in Ireland, we actually have a pretty big community that's all trying to help each other. There's no snottiness, snidiness, no one's trying to kick anyone else down, everyone just wants everyone else to succeed.
So the answer is I'm wrong. Why didn't you tell me that yesterday? We were asked specifically to talk about kind of upcoming and future technologies and how they might impact on games. So there's obviously a lot of things happening, like Oculus Rift and Google Glass smartwatches. So I'm interested to know, does the panel have opinions on where we're likely to see this going, in their opinion?
Maybe we can liven things up. I think it's a load of crock.
Go on.
I actually agree.
Yeah, same. It's sort of gimmicky.
I think like the easy answer is to go Oculus, but for me the most amazing aspect of Oculus is the fact that it started on Kickstarter and was sold for $2 billion. More so than actual virtual reality, right? Because virtual reality's been around for so long. If you think of Tron and things like that. So it's like, yeah, I get that idea, it's just better than it was. But like to actually start on Kickstarter and then have Zuckerberg buy for $2 billion, I'm like, that blew me away.
Yeah, what's he going to do
reality.
with it? That's what's stuck in my head is what is Facebook going to do with virtual reality?
Maybe they just want to expand. You never know. Like Facebook doesn't always want to just be the social media center. They could want to go into games.
So I'm going to reach out and like you.
Virtual pokes and virtual likes. And so it's if you kind of like someone, you virtually like them, right?
There's an argument that it's about blocking other people as well. So maybe that's a bit negative. But
it could have been to save tax. And he makes that much.
I think there is a place for VR. There's no doubt. I mean, but I think it's a niche. It might end up being quite a big niche, but I don't see us all sitting around in public wearing big ass headsets. And actually, somebody described it as the what do they call them? Not prams, but the things that the kids wear when they're learning to baby walkers. Thank you.
He has kids.
Yeah. I can't see us like going around in baby walkers in a big open arena, bumping off each other with headsets on and shit. It's just I can't see that happening.
I think for me, the aspect is going to be social. So, like when I was playing games before most people here were actually born.
You keep playing the age card, and like obviously I'm older, and I'm right here.
Doesn't wash with us.
I said most. I said most people. It was always more fun. Like, so you play in an Amstrad or Commodore, there was only it was one player, right? You couldn't play multiplayer. So, but it was always more fun when friends were there. And then you moved to like NES and Mega Drive, and then it was like 2 controllers. And it was always more fun when you like could play Street Fighter 2, for example, like 1-on-1. And then I think like GoldenEye on the N64 was like the first real game I remember where it was like 4 people. And I don't even think GoldenEye was intended to be like 4 split screens. Because like this is the mid-90s, so a lot of the tech that's currently there didn't exist. And for me, it was always the social aspect and having a controller thrown at me because I won the game. So I think it all boils back to social. And like when I play League of Legends, I actually enjoy it a lot more when I play with friends. Or if I've met players in the community, like I'll actively look to play rather than play by myself. So for me, it's all about social.
So do you think, is it a case that rather than being all in one place, that we'll all be hunkered down in the living room on our own, playing with friends online with our headset on and whatnot?
I kind of hope not.
So do I, yeah.
Have you ever, there's a book that was released a couple of years ago, Ernest Cline, it's called Ready Player One. Has anyone read it? It's an absolutely awesome book. If you're into gaming, you have to go read Ready Player One. So when Riot came looking for me, I was actually reading Ready Player One. And the TLDR is that it's about a guy who started writing games for Atari and then moved the whole way up to like World of Warcraft and then disappeared for 7 years. And then came out with a virtual reality game that just basically took people out of the reality, and the virtual reality world became more financially worth, became more beneficial, became more fun, so people moved into the VR world. And then what happened is like fossil fuels ran out, and it got really bad, so people literally sat in living rooms in VR. And then there were like big corporations that came in, so it's kind of like your kind of good, bad, standard stuff. But then the guy died, and he left an Easter egg challenge. And then it talked about like people streaming and earning money through playing games, which for me blew my mind. And then I actually came back to reality and started researching League of Legends and was like, oh, people actually do this and make money. So you see a lot of those things that are actually really cool, but I hope the VR element never actually happens, because the key message at the end of the book was don't actually forget about reality, and don't actually forget about friends and family.
Thank you. So since we're kind of trying to talk about futures, something that's just hit the mainstream media really is esports, and like League of Legends and Dota and stuff like that. Apparently these are watched by more people than the Super Bowl, and suddenly the news media realized that it actually exists. I saw a news report where the reporter was incredulous that people would sit and watch other people playing games. There's a big irony being missed there, that they didn't realize they were expecting us to watch them to watch other people playing games. So, esports, like, where's this all going? Any ideas? I personally have been thinking about my next game might be in that space, which is probably crazy for an indie. Any wisdom?
I got nothing on esports, sorry. Yeah, I don't understand it, really. That's not entirely true. I suppose, it's a spectator sport. You've got these gladiators, and there's all that kind of element to it. But personally,
well, apparently it's like the national sport in Korea, Yeah. So, Mark, no?
Okay. So, has anyone watched LCS recently? Okay. Does anyone watch LCS religiously every weekend? Colin, your hand should be up. You work for Riot. Come on. Okay, so I would actually rather watch LCS than watch Match of the Day now. Like, so I grew up, I've played a lot of sport, and I was a massive football fan, but I've become like kind of, I find football disingenuous, and I find I can't really relate to people that are earning £250,000 per week. And I find that the quality of football has actually gone down a lot. So for someone who religiously would have watched every single match up until a few years ago, I actually get more enjoyment out of watching LCS. If you watch has anyone watched the Road to Worlds videos? They're pretty cool, yeah? So the really amazing thing is, like, if you watch season 1, it's like in DreamHack, which is in Sweden, and it's like 200 people. And then all of a sudden in season 2, it's in the Galen Center in LA, which is like thousands of people. And then last year was in the Staples Center, which was like 20,000 people sitting down to watch 10 guys, 5 from South Korea and 5 from China, play a computer game. And that is just ludicrous. And you've got multiple millions watching it online. So then this year, the finals are going to be, so the finals are actually underway now. So at the minute, we're going through the quarterfinal stage, and it's going through different countries in Europe. So just finished the quarterfinal stages in Taiwan, and this current stage is in Singapore, and then it's moving to South Korea. And the actual final of the game is going to be in a stadium that is called the Olympic Stadium in Seoul. I think it held the Olympics in '88. I could be wrong, but it definitely held games during the World Cup in 2002, and it's going to be like almost 70,000 people. So when you actually look at those videos and you talk to Mark Merrill or Brandon Beck, and they're like, we thought a few people would be interested in watching because like real gamers will actually appreciate amazing gamers. So we thought like a few people would like it. We didn't think that millions would actually tune in, or that 70,000 people, or that we would have to move to a bigger stadium every year. And like the big thing, if you look at, say, Riot, and you look at our manifesto, and one of our manifesto statements is about being humble. And people think that's just, PR, but it actually isn't. It's like, we have to be really humble because that's who we are, but also we have no idea how successful this could potentially be, or how big it could actually be. No one would have predicted in 3 years it would have gone from 200 people at DreamHack to 70,000 people watching in Korea. But like, to actually see the enjoyment that fans get from watching top players play, I think it's phenomenal. And then you have to think about, if you watch the Super Bowl is no longer about the actual game. It's about the advertisements before, after, and during the game. But then you look at the Super Bowl 50 years ago, and what was it? There was like hardly any people tuning in, and now it's like the biggest sporting event in US sport. Mm-hmm. So it's impossible to predict how big it's going to be. Yeah. But I find it awesome and just incredibly humbling to see that people take so much enjoyment from it. Yeah.
No, there's something you said there about people appreciating the skill, and I think that's why soccer actually is quite popular, because it's something we've all done. Whereas the sports that you've never played, you just can't really appreciate the skill, and maybe that's what this is all about. It's because it's very accessible to people to actually do themselves. Therefore, they can.
Yeah, like there's champions that I really struggle on. There's a lot of champions I really struggle on actually, but let's not talk about my faults. But when you play a champion, and you're like, how do I string his abilities together? How do I string his spells? Or how do I bring his passive? I struggle really with the passive. Like, how do I bring something that's not active into the game? Mm-hmm. But like, when you look at some of the guys play, you're just like speechless, because you're like, how the hell did he do that? So there's this one move. It's like, I think if you Google it, it's like the best move ever in League of Legends. Has anyone heard of Faker? So Faker is this like South Korean guy. I think he's like 18 or 19, and he basically became a phenomenon last year. And he did this move on a champion called Zed. And Colin and I were looking at it about 2 weeks ago, and we still can't work out how he did it. And to actually see that like ingenuity is just phenomenal.
I was just about to say, does the audience want to?
The amount of money that's being pumped into esports is like the
I don't actually know the exact figures with regard to esports in, say, Dota or League of Legends. It's kind of like a difficult question to answer, but really, if you've got people and that's their livelihood, playing, they don't have a real job, then I would expect that, it's only natural that they get rewarded. And it's like a competitive sport, right? That if you do well in it and you succeed and you're training hard, then surely, you deserve to get some kind of financial remuneration. Like these guys are playing 12, 14 hours a day, every day. And they're going under very strict training plans in certain teams. And then some other teams aren't as strict. But yeah, I think there has to be some kind of financial element.
I kind of think of it like UFC or maybe boxing to a degree. You've got the athletes. I mean, they're not necessarily physical athletes, but definitely mental athletes. So they do warrant reward. And the only way that I'm not a big UFC fan either, but at the same time I can appreciate why people get into it, because they look at their hero and what he can do, and they're in awe of it. And I guess it's the same for the esports.
Hi. With Section 481 being so successful for bringing big films and productions to Ireland, do you think we'd see the same with gaming companies, and maybe companies like EA and that who have customer support bases will bring creative IP creation here?
Would be fantastic. There's kind of two different parts to that. One is bringing in larger companies, and the other is fostering local talent. So one of the topics that, again, I go back to the Romero's visit here, one of the topics that's come up is when you see gaming hubs around the world, typically what happens is someone has a runaway success and they hire lots of people. And then they leave, spin off, create new companies. And in Ireland, you've seen it in the animation industry. So yeah, I mean, it would be great if we could get a similar kind of process working here for games. That would be fantastic.
So it could happen. It could just happen naturally, is kind of what you're saying.
Well, the incentives would need to be there. So the reason why I think maybe 481 would be important or something like it is you need the right incentives.
Hey guys, what do you think it is about MOBAs that has given such a boost to esports in general, like League of Legends and the internationals with Dota 2 as well, when we've had years and decades even of Counter-Strike or different first-person shooters with esports? What do you think it is about MOBAs that's given such a boost in popularity to esports in the past couple of years? Differentiates MOBAs to something like a first-person shooter.
I should have studied more. So when I look at, say, League of Legends, what really comes to me is the team play. So you may disagree or agree, but I think it's quite hard to have like one champion that, regardless of how you build that champion is going to be strong from early to late game. Now, there are some champions that are a little bit OP at various stages, right? But usually they're nerfed. And as a result of that, within League of Legends, I don't really play Dota, so I can't really comment on it, to be honest, so there's no point in me lying. But within League, team play is incredibly important. So you'll typically have a shot caller, but you've got 5 champions, and no one champion can really run the whole game. And as a result of like the team play aspect, as opposed to say in an FPS, I think there has to be more team play, there has to be more social cohesion between the team. And what also can happen within League is different champions are stronger at different parts of the game. And also, you could say buy the wrong item for a champion, and that kind of screws you a little bit, but not as much as, say, in other games. And because there's so much strategy, you really need to focus on your team play as well. So I think it's really the whole social cohesion between the team. I think it's the team play. And I think it's the strategic element. So it could be controversial, but for me, I think playing League is harder than playing chess. And I think the amount of strategy in it is phenomenal. And the more that you get into the game, the more you realize you don't know. And the more you watch top players playing the game, the more you realize you don't know. And it's not just mechanically. It's not like watching Faker on Z and going, holy, like, how did he do that? But it's also like, why are they going for Baron now? Why are they going for Dragon? Like, why are they pushing that lane? So I think there's just so many facets to it that for me, it's really interesting. I even enjoy Champ Select because it's like, some teams will do like the standard bans, but other teams will like come out with something totally different. And then as well, there's the whole meta aspect, and that can change. So you could be watching it 1 month, and then the next month, because it's like, because we follow like an agile kind of approach in everything that we do, there'll be a new patch, and the meta could be like slightly altered, right? So if you look at top lane now, Alistair all of a sudden is up top, whereas like 6 months ago he wasn't seen ever. And I think it's like all those elements that ultimately make it really interesting, and things are constantly changing. Like for example, if you had watched Fnatic play yesterday, you would have thought they were crap. And then today they beat Nanjing White Sword. So like they actually beat a top team in Korea today. And you wouldn't have predicted that yesterday. Nor would you have predicted that Alliance would have gone 0-2, which they have. Does that answer the question?
So short answer, it's really good, but game design has made it different to FPSs.
I think so. I just think there's so much strategy in the team play.
How you doing? Do you think there's anything that the industry currently fixates on that you'd like to see the end of, like the arms race to better graphics or Twitch-based violence gameplay? Is there any sort of areas there that you think that are just a cul-de-sac to creativity and you'd like to see completely abolished, or see a massive wave, a movement away from that?
Freemium.
Yeah, certainly the model of the app stores is forcing bad stuff to happen in order to succeed on them, yeah.
Freemium has got everybody fixated on grind games, which, you know, have a place, but now everything has got to be a grind game, and that, you know, it just doesn't work.
Is there not an argument as well that those sort of games are for slightly non-traditional gamers who, you know, that's what they want? They want something simpler that's...
Actually, I would argue that what non-traditional gamers want is what's put in front of them.
Yeah.
I think one of the interesting things actually about the move to freemium games and the dependency on the IAPs is I saw an article recently by research done by Swerve. They do basically analytics for mobiles, and they said out of all the users, something like 1.7% of people actually buy anything in IAP. So everyone seems to be basing their game models on something that doesn't really work. You know, if only 1.7% of your audience is giving you any money, it's not sustainable.
What's even more crazy about those numbers, so I think it was 1.35%, and so it's even worse. And of that 1.3%, I think the median spend was something like $22 or $23. And they showed a graph of the volume of transactions and the value of those transactions, and actually the area where you could get most value, even though it didn't have necessarily the most transactions, was in the $11 to $20 range for an IAP. So, you know, if you're playing your favorite game on your mobile device and you're looking at a $15 IAP, how many people would go, oh yeah, that's for me? You know, it's pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi guys. Just in regards to, because you all work in obviously making games.
It's the disjointed voice.
From all the way back here.
Oh yeah, no, I see.
Back behind the table. Like obviously you all have made games in your own certain ways. Would you say there is a specific engine that you would use and specific code you would use inside that engine? Like to make the games with, like that you would find easier or better to use?
I can answer that really easily.
I love them all, is my answer.
Unity, C# for me.
They're good for different things, right? Yeah. But they're all excellent. Any game engine I've seen, I just love. I just think this is such clever stuff. It's great, you know.
If you want to learn language, though, C++, because then you can pretty much do anything after that.
Yeah, generally just find one that you like. A lot of people love Unity and is the big thing now, especially for mobile games. Personally, I don't like it, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And it could just be my coding background. I'm used to building everything from scratch in C++. So if I do stuff, that's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of success with games like with engines like Game Maker, you know, that's just a step up from scratch, really. But it's what you can do with it is awesome if you've got the ideas, you know. So. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
No.
What do people think of, or what impact do people think the Internet of Things might have on games?
Too much hype sometimes. Will it beat a level and turn on your mate's cooker, is it? Or?
I don't know. I'm just, you know, shooting the breeze, see what people think. Because, like, if you have all these connected devices that are not necessarily smart in and of themselves, like we were talking about different types of games being social. If you go back to before we did video games, pretty much all games were social. What does it mean if the social aspect of your games involves stuff that you're carrying or stuff that is in your house or whatever?
Probably making the gym a lot more fun.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Have you ever seen over in Germany on the road crossings, they just have Pong? You play Pong and they're waiting to cross the road.
Excellent, excellent, yeah, excellent.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
What would have you imagined an answer? Because you'd like to hear from somebody here in that, or you just give us something to think about?
No, it's something to think about. Like, so we kind of glossed over it a little bit, but Google Glass. You know, if you look at what VR might do in terms of games, it's pretty obvious how you might go about using that. But Google Glass, you know, how would you use that? How would you use augmented reality to play a game? I mean, obviously, if you've got people running around the city and running in front of cars and stuff, that's got dangers associated with and all that kind of stuff. But there are lots of games already that use real-world stuff. And if that real-world stuff is now connected, you know, that suddenly ups it a notch.
Yeah.
I suppose kind of related to that, there's a game I heard about called Ingress, where you play it on your mobile, and the idea behind it is that you go around and people can tag works of art or major public structures, and as players go around, they pick one of two factions, and then when they're at an area, sure, why not?
So when you're at a specific area, you can claim some public structure for your faction, and it ingress. So you just play it on your mobile. You turn on mobile data. You walk around, and you can claim areas.
That's the Google game, is it?
Yeah, it was on Android, I think, and iOS probably.
Yeah.
So like I remember playing it for a little while, but then not because I ran up my phone bill. But I suppose that's kind of an example of people running around. You have no idea who you're playing with, but you like find out, oh, someone claimed an area back from me. Got to go over there on my lunch break and claim areas for virtual points. So it's an example, I suppose, of people working on these interconnected devices and playing a game that they don't have to pay attention to all the time for things they don't really get out of it.
It sounds like a gamified Foursquare.
Yeah.
Virtual, large-scale Foursquare.
Thanks. Just, is that not kind of just, nothing's really changed in that, it's just kind of a digital way of here in there's that university club called Assassins, where you get a list and then you go around chasing people down and you have to imaginary kill them, and then you get points. Is it not just the same sort of thing that we've always been doing, just with digital tracking? So nothing's really changed in that regard for those kind of internet games?
Yeah, for sure. But Call of Duty is basically cowboys and Indians.
Yeah.
We ran around with sticks and stuff. Yeah. So I think you're right, but yeah.
Can I ask a question? Did you say you do internet security?
Yep.
I was just curious. Does that mean that you you have to like, are you like reacting like all the time, or are you trying to stay ahead of them? Just
So this could probably go on for a couple of hours. Doing security at the minute is quite challenging. Each year it gets more challenging. Doing security for a games company is incredibly challenging. So we have a lot of players, and a lot of our players are very technical. So and people are becoming more technical younger, which means obviously there's more technical people around. So if you kind of assume that 1 in 10 people that you meet is a bit of a not a nice person, then you've obviously got a lot of people potentially against you. Some people obviously don't like losing in game, and they can react a certain way. But also, when something becomes popular, there's obviously more people that would like to take it down. And then when it really comes to security, there's so many facets. So you've obviously got things like payments, which has always been there. But you've also got, you're always going to have risk. So if you don't have payments, you can't take money in, so you can't have a valid business. But if you do have a valid business and you do take money in, then you have to make sure you do it securely. But you also want to make sure that you do it in the most usable way possible. So there's always going to be a risk calculation. Additionally, when you've got an online game, you're going to be a massive target for DDoS. So when it comes to DDoS, the easiest way to fix it is to turn your server off, but then you don't have a game, right? So when it comes to security, you've got massive challenges like that. So you're constantly trying to stay ahead. But within information security, you're kind of seeing like a sea change of attitude in terms of if I worked for a bank, I could literally go out and go, you will not do this, and that's it. Now, if I work in a games company or I work in an engineering company, somewhere where people are following, Kanban or following Agile or Scrum methodologies, then, really it's about fast iteration, and it's about getting new features out, it's about getting code out. So I can't really walk around like I'm a banker and go, you cannot do this because it will, there's this regulation or whatever. So sometimes when there's things like compliance or like financial regulations, then in security you have to do that, and that's like a top-down measure. But if you're going to work in a games company or somewhere that's like very fast-moving and agile, then you can't really have that preventative attitude. So then you have to move to what we call attack-driven defense. So that's really where in security you try to think like an attacker. Now you're never going to be 100%, right? There's obviously things that you're never going to know about. For example, 2 days ago there was a really bad vulnerability announced in Bash. It's also in C Shell, T Shell, and Z Shell. So if anyone runs Linux or Mac OS or probably Solaris, then they all run shells, and it's a really, really bad vulnerability. So you don't know about something like that, but Unix has been around for 45 years roughly. Linux has been around for 20 years. So that means that there's potentially been a bug written in C for 20 odd years that people didn't know about, right? So you're going to have to be reactive to that. But then in the other element, you're going to have to try and think proactively to constantly stay ahead. But like everything in security, you can really sum it up like an arms race, if that makes sense. It's really trying to stay ahead, but knowing that you're never going to really stay ahead. And what you try to do is you try to move towards being able to quickly respond. So if you work in InfoSec, you really need to assume that you're going to be hacked. And what you want to figure out is once you get hacked, respond really. You want to be able to detect it, so you want to have visibility, and then you want to be able to respond as quickly as possible to mitigate the damage. So that's the way it's moved from, say, 15 years ago, when it was more like prevention first, right? Because prevention isn't necessarily better than the cure. Because if you prevent a lot, then your developers or your business people or your artists aren't necessarily going to get features or code released, because you're constantly going to be a blocker. So you never want to be a blocker. But it might be okay working in a bank or a government being a blocker, right? Does that make sense? Oh, and the other thing is learn C.
I have a question. Other than League of Legends, of course, what other games are you guys playing at the moment, or that you've seen that are in beta release that you would recommend us all checking out?
It wouldn't be my usual cup of tea, but I just literally started playing Hearthstone because it was mentioned by the Romeros, and it's good. I'm enjoying it so far.
I'm just going to go with everyone should get Destiny because it's pretty awesome and we are used in it. But no, I don't play a lot of games these days myself. I'm very busy with stuff. So it's Hearthstone I've heard of, though, is supposed to be really good. There's a few good indie games from Ireland coming out that you could check out. Anything by, say, Bitsmith or 6 Minutes, they're usually pretty good. And you're also helping like your local industry. So if you want to check those out.
I'd actually +1 Hearthstone. I see a lot of people playing it. Seems to be really popular, especially in the Riot office. And then I play a few games on my iPad, and I think the one game I've sort of really enjoyed playing is DH4, Dungeon Hunter. So it's not the most challenging game, but I kind of gravitate towards session-based games. I'm not exactly going to be able to spend hours playing EVE Online or World of Warcraft.
I have The Last of Us remastered, sitting, waiting for me to play.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten near it yet.
My PS4 is used to watch, Disney movies and stuff, Frozen.
Yeah.
The game industry is known for a high burnout. What's kept you making games, or what will keep you making games? So, in terms of burnout, you don't see very many old game developers for various reasons.
I think that question can be really translated to the tech industry, and it goes back to the answer that I said earlier. It's all about doing what I love, and if you don't do what you love, then you're going to burn out. Like the hours that I work are crazy, and they're a constant source of discussion in my family home. And some people frequently tell me to get off chat and to stop answering emails, but I genuinely love what I do. Like I think I'd rather work in Riot at the minute than be a Premier League footballer. Like, I genuinely love it, and I think, for me, that's the answer. And then you have to manage your downtime. Like, I make sure I work out, I make sure, I go swimming and things like that, and try to have family time. And I've become really religious with my calendar. So, I decline stuff. And I actually put in time in my calendar to play games. So that's one thing that I've learned, is that you have to manage your time and be prepared to say no.
Yeah, you hear about companies, especially game development companies, where they're in constant crunch time and you're basically living in the office. And I think it's okay for a certain amount of time if it is what you love, and it's always grand to do as much work as you want to work. But if you're going to live in the office, do constant work, you are going to burn out. It's just the way it is. So you need to manage your time, that you have time to do stuff other than your job, and you have time to enjoy yourself, so that it doesn't just become looking at a screen. You're still doing what you love, and you still remember why you love doing it.
Yeah, I've been told we need to wrap up, so I don't know if there's any one quick question, or we'll just finish up. All right. Thank you.
Go. We've got some key from our sponsors here. As a thank you for coming out. And it was wonderful having you here.
Thank you very much.
Again, everybody. Thank you.
We actually started another internship.
Yeah, so this is the first year. I don't know how good the first year's going to be.
If you just all hold on to your seats there for a second, Dr. Michael Madden will just do the closing address really quickly. Thank you.
We're doing an internship in security team.
Well, everybody, thank you all very much for coming along. This has been a fantastic event. Can we get David back up? Can we get David up on stage? I think David Renton here, who initiated and coordinated all of this, really deserves his credit. It's fantastic work. So I think David and all of the people who are also involved, all down the back there with the laminates, have done a fantastic job today in coordinating this unique and very, very interesting event. It was done entirely by student power, with minimal support from the university formally, driven entirely by their initiative, and that's, I think, very, very impressive for a bunch of undergraduate students. It's fantastic. So well done. And I think it's been a really great event today. We had excellent opening address by the president of the university. We had the Tech Leaders panel moderated by Catherine Cronin, very interesting and fascinating talks there. We had Avaya talking about their technologies. We had HP talking about OpenStack. We had a great talk from Stephen Howell of Microsoft about how you should prepare yourselves for yourselves for future careers. We had, and then this games panel moderated by Sam Redfern, who did a great job as well. So well done to everyone involved, and thank you all. Well done. Okay. Well done. And hopefully it'll happen again next year. So.
Taking my sign and I'm going home. That's enough. Get out!